All three of them require a ton of work to define what good looks like for top talent. There's a lot of opportunity, I think, at most companies to better define some of those terms we talked about, to then get your team aligned on that, to actually do some calibration work during your interviewing process. Make sure that we're all aligned on what senior means, on what customer focused means, on what adaptable means. Making sure you have a mechanism for aligning people on that. And that's often something that doesn't happen very well in traditional interview training. In fact, I see it as a big opportunity for the hiring manager. I think her role can be to sit down with her interviewing team, take a rec for a senior engineer or a salesperson, and break it down. Like, let's take our job description, which is probably not awesome, right? It's probably not awesome. Let's take our job description. Let's actually turn this into hiring criteria. Let's talk about what are the critical skills they need to have. And let's talk about what skills it would be nice for them to have, but honestly, they're super trainable. Let's talk about the thing formerly known as culture fit. What are the critical behaviors they have to have coming in the door? Those behaviors that we need to make sure we focus on. What should this person have already achieved? So not just what skills do they have, but how do they put those skills into practice? You can read a lot of books about how to ride a motorcycle. You can read a lot of books around how to bake a cake. But I want to see you ride that bike. I want to see you, bake that cake. It doesn't do any good if you know the recipe. Like, you need to know how to actually do it. So what have you actually put into practice? And then the fourth area is are you naturally motivated to do this work? Do you like to do this work? Because you're not going to be a high performer if you're hired into a company where you're not naturally connected to the work, to the mission of the company. So we want to look at the skills. We want to look at the behaviors. We want to look at the achievements. We want to look at the intrinsic motivators of this candidate. That takes a lot of work to kind of pull that out of traditional job descriptions. It takes leadership from a hiring manager, but it's probably some of the single most important work a hiring manager can do. A lot of hiring managers have just an unbelievable opportunity to force alignment on their interviewing team. And so once you have the alignment, then you might have another mechanism like a hiring committee or a bar raiser or something that allows you to kind of keep that bar really high, to kind of enforce the high bar, if you will. But all of them require a lot of work around that. All of these, the hiring committees, the bar raisers, the pipeline model, they all have a focus on written feedback. So rather than just kind of having people do a thumbs or a quick conversation or putting in just a rating scale, the idea is that you want to make sure that you have some mechanism for making sure that your hiring decisions are evidence oriented. I don't want anyone saying, I get the feel she might be a good blank. I just didn't get the sense he'd be a good culture fit. I'm not sure she's really got the leadership potential we're looking for. Like, when you hear that, you have got to translate that into evidence. So if you say that to me verbally in a debrief conversation, someone like me, a good talent advisor, is going to push back on you, and I'm going to ask you what evidence you got. And ideally, even before that conversation, you've written down really detailed feedback. You would probably be shocked if you've never seen a hiring packet from a place like Google, or you've never seen interviewing feedback from a place like Amazon with its bar raisers. People write very detailed feedback. Jeff Bezos, the CEO and founder of Amazon, when I worked with him and I read his interview feedback, he writes detailed feedback, paragraphs, evidence-based paragraphs based on his interview. And so when you build a culture around hiring committees or bar raisers, for example, you're really also committing to really making written feedback a big part of your process. And then you're using debriefs as a way to calibrate, to align, to coach, to make the final decision. And then there's also, just if you want to put one of these programs in place, it's so much easier to do this when you're early, when you're a small company, than later when you have, a big company to work in, where the buy-in is going to be really hard. We have worked with companies that have hired ex-Amazon employees, especially out of technology teams, that go into a new company and say, hey, we're going to put bar raisers in. And, I always kind of, really? Like, is that the right move? You can't just copy paste Google or Amazon or any company and copy paste a mechanism and stick it into another company and be able to have confidence that it's just going to work. It takes a tremendous amount of leadership to make these things work. And you have to be solving a real problem. You can't just kind of put something like this in because you're used to it. I always ask clients when they say, hey, we want to put something like this in, I always say, what problem are you trying to solve? And is this the right mechanism to solve that? So getting the buy-in around this stuff is really challenging.